I think we can get started. So, good morning, good evening, everyone. Our conversation today is with Dr. Sue Law, and it's on a topic that is up on the screen, which I think is in itself fascinating. But I think what's going to make it even more interesting is the fact that Sue has a very, very insightful and interesting journey that is going to make this conversation a lot of fun. And so before we get into it, a couple of quick housekeeping things. We just please ask your questions in the chat window, and we'll make sure to answer them at the end. If you're not already a Longevity Lab member, there are lots of good reasons to do it. It's free, and hopefully it adds a lot of value. And if you want to get on it, just click on the link that Nivzita will post in the chat window or scan the QR code. So there were a couple of announcements I wanted to make. One is some of you have already started joining our sub-communities, but our main communities are Forum Circle 1, Forum Circle 2, and so on. Those are our general communities where topics are pretty widely varying. But we've also created sub-communities which are very topic specific. And so the ones that we've introduced are weight management, women's health, strength and mobility, heart health and diabetes, children's health, and elder care. And so if any of you are interested in conversations in those specific verticals, you can join. As always, they're all free. And so you can join as many of them as are relevant to you. And what will happen on those groups is every week there will be 3 messages that we will send out, and they'll be on the concept of the weekly themes like we have on the main community. You notice there is a weekly theme of the importance of vitamin D or the importance of strength training and so on. Similarly, there will be a weekly theme, but those themes will be specific to those verticals. And the messages you should expect to receive are on Tuesday. For that week's theme, there'll be an informational post as to why and what is that that aspect important for. On Thursday, there is a quiz question to sort of make you think about a specific aspect, and with the answers coming on Friday. And then on Saturday is a community discussion question that will be put out. And what we have found so far is it leads to some very, very specific, deeply insightful conversations between members, and Coach Kai, Dr. Kai jump in whenever there is a question that's asked of them. And questions on all these groups will be answered within 24 hours. Unlike Forum Circle 1, which is open for community inputs only on the weekends, weekdays we keep it quiet, we keep it read-only. These sub-communities are much smaller. They're typically anywhere from 50 to maybe 150, 200 people. And those are going to be open throughout the week. Right? So I highly recommend you check out the sub-communities. You can always join them. And if you don't think they're relevant, you can get out. But whatever I've seen is been quite fascinating, the conversations that happen in these sub-communities. We will send out a link to the sub-community so that you can check them out afterwards. The second thing I wanted to announce were adult vaccinations. Right now in India, we have partnered with Dr. Sanat Phatak. For some of you, you may remember he was one of our past expert speakers on these Thursday calls. And his expertise is in rheumatology and clinical immunology. And he runs a clinic in Pune. The vaccinations that are recommended as per the guidelines for vaccinations in India are the ones I've listed over here on the screen, with the typical recommendations as per the vaccination guideline. And then for vaccinations for high-risk individuals, those are also provided. Yellow fever is the only one that his clinic does not provide. If you have a prescription, that's great. If you don't have one, Dr. Pathak can provide it. And there is a number over there you can call. Again, we have no commercial interest in any of this. We don't get any commissions or cuts. This is just something that I think is important. I can tell you, I personally take the influenza vaccine every year. And if you are surrounded by sick people, it's definitely worth doing. You don't want them to get sick because you carry an infection with you. Shingles is something that I've taken. I've seen a friend of mine who didn't take it, and it was very, very painful. So that's something worth taking. I have, I think, DPT, MMR I took when I was much younger, and I have not taken any of the others. I think even the pneumococcal vaccine I did take. In the US, it's recommended earlier. So from my personal experience, some of them I have taken. I would encourage each of you to think about which ones are relevant to you and consider taking them. Right now, we've sort of partnered with Dr. Pathak, and we'll try and partner with other doctors across the country and in other parts of the world as well to give you those access to those resources. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is weekly summaries. So one of the changes we are going to make on the main forum circle 1, forum circle 2, the general communities, is that all questions that are asked, you can either ask them in the WhatsApp group or you can ask them through the Google form. That continues. But the change we are going to make is now answers to questions will be provided one-on-one to the person who asked the question. The difference between asking it on the WhatsApp group is the identity of the person who's asking the question is open for everyone to see. And for many of you, if the question is generic, you don't really care. But if you want to keep your identity private, you can use the Google form because then nobody knows who's asked the question. But until now, we used to provide the answers on the group. Now we will provide the answers only one-on-one. However, and this only applies to Forum Circle 1, Forum Circle 2. For the sub-communities, right now, you can ask the question through the WhatsApp group, in which case you get the answer on the WhatsApp group for everyone to see. If you ask the question through the Google form, then we still answer the question on the WhatsApp group, but without any identifying information. So that will all continue. However, there is a lot of learning from the questions and answers. And so we are going to take all these questions, answers, all these informational posts, and every week send out one summary. That way you don't have to sit and read 20 different questions and answers. You just get to see the summaries, and in a couple of sentences, you get a overview of all the different conversations that have happened. So, Saili, thank you for the call out. And so this we'll put out the summaries on the sub-communities as well. Okay, and really the goal is we want learnings to continue, but we don't want to overwhelm people with so many messages. So that's that. Our speaker for next week is Catherine Rogers. This week seems to be our UK week because last week's speaker was from the UK. Sue is from the UK, and next week Catherine is from the UK. So this is our UK week. But Catherine will be talking about the topic of Alzheimer's, and I think it's going to be a very, very interesting conversation. So if that's of interest, definitely join in. All right. So to our expert and our speaker of the day of the week is Dr. Sue Law. I'm going to not go through her bio. It's up there, and there's a lot more which I did not put. But I just want to share a few comments that I have observed in my conversation with Sue and why I sent out the message beforehand to join it. Like I said, her story is one of truly of resilience and empathy. And in a topic like mental health, empathy is, I think, one of the most critical elements. It's already a topic that has a lot of stigma associated with it. And I believe that's changing with every passing year. I think it's changing for the better. but there is still a long way to go. And then you run into a doctor like Sue, and I think that stigma goes away because of the way she is and her being and and her own experiences. And I think as you hear her journey, her story, you'll just realize that it's not a bug, it's a feature, because it strengthens you. It teaches you how to deal with life by learning how to deal with it. And I think this topic is even more important today than ever before, because I'm sure many of you not only are dealing with all the change that's happening around us for ourselves, but we worry about our kids and our rest of our family. And we might be in the best of spirits and mental health today, but that doesn't mean in a week, in a month, in a year, that might not change. In fact, now I almost feel like it's a guarantee that we're all going to get hit by this at different points in time. And I hope today's conversation sheds light for everybody on how to prepare and how to deal with it. So without further ado, Sue, welcome to the community meet.
Wow, and thanks ever so much for having me. I'm incredibly excited to be here. It's the first time I've done anything like this, so you'll have to be gentle with me, but I know I'm in really good hands with you, Nikhil. So we'll all survive. Yeah, and it's been a great privilege getting to know you and your team and your community of late. So yeah, that's great. So just a little bit about me. So professional background, by training, I was anyway, an NHS GP. I worked in deprived inner city Plymouth for 15 years or so, but I've also worked in occupational health role with doctors, with drivers, and in the last 2 or 3 years, I have developed an absolute passion for lifestyle medicine. And which is a bit of a surprise, really, given I consider myself what I call an ex-fags and booze doc. And what I mean by that is that when I was a junior doctor, like many of my colleagues, I smoked and I drank far too much. But despite all of that, I don't smoke anymore, and I drink a lot less now, possibly even within recommended limits, which I'm going to celebrate. But despite all of that, I fell in love with lifestyle medicine completely by accident, because I moved house and had a longer drive to work. And then I thought, well, I'd had 2 children in 2 years, had some time off work with maternity leave. And I thought, right, I need to get myself up to date. So let's learn about lifestyle medicine. Which, as I'm sure your community know, is all about supporting people to make simple, sustainable changes to prevent, treat, and sometimes reverse chronic lifestyle related diseases. So things like heart disease, the #1 killer in men, dementia, the #1 killer in women in the UK, cancer, diabetes, all general badness, things we don't want to get. But along with being a doctor and a GP and lifestyle doctor, I'm also a wife, a mother, and a patient. So a person living with a chronic health condition, like many other doctors are, and it's something that we perhaps, like you say, don't talk about enough. So for me, I was diagnosed with bipolar, or manic depression, as it used to be called, which has been really quite tough at times. And this is only the second time I've talked about this publicly, so forgive me if I'm not very polished. The first time I spoke about it was in front of a group of 250 fifth-year medical students who are about to graduate and become doctors, and it was in a day designed to try and help them have a flourish rather than just survive as junior doctors. And what I started with them was saying, well, 25 years ago, I was sat where you were sat now, except I wasn't, because I was ill. And so, yeah, just before my finals, I was diagnosed with bipolar. I had a hypomanic episode, which I've spent a lifetime saying was a little inconvenient. But the reality is it was much more than a little inconvenient. It was really devastating. And while my friends did their exams, went off on a post-exam holiday, which I'd organised, which was so particularly depressing that I didn't get to go, and went off to start their new life as doctors, I was stuck at home living with mum, feeling dreadful, being stuffed full of pills that didn't make me feel much better at the start. But you know, life went on. I got better. I did my finals. I you know, went on to become a junior doctor, albeit in a slightly different place from what I'd planned. But yeah, life goes on. And after I told my story for the first time, one of the medical students came and spoke to me and said about her likely soon to be diagnosis with bipolar. So actually, and I was able to help her and support her. So I feel that it's worth getting over my terrified, you know how nervous I've been about this, my nerves about speaking, you know, publicly, if it can help other people. And if, you know, it's possible to be happy, healthy and enjoying life, not exclusively, but, you know, largely, and managing these, you know, difficult and trying conditions with a lot of help, a lot of support and a bit of practice.
I think it's incredibly, it takes a lot to say what you just said, Sue, and I truly appreciate you opening up to the community, because this is the authenticity that the world needs. And it's always great to put on, you know, for all of us to put on this act of we are great, we are perfect, but I don't think that makes us very relatable. And I think what the world needs more of is people who are willing to relate and share what matters. It's uncommon, but then when it does happen, those people to me are the superheroes that the world needs. So thank you for sharing that. And I think it, as I was saying earlier, it has made you who you are. You are, you know, one of the mottos that you know, you talk about is I think you said, let me see.
Fill your life with things that make you smile.
Yeah, exactly. Fill your life with things that make you smile. And I think that sounds very trivial, but it is actually a big deal. And you have learned that.
Can I tell you the story of that?
No,
how
I'd
that
like
came?
to hear that. Yeah, please.
Actually got that. This is where so this spotty umbrella is where that story came from. I saw this spotty umbrella and I thought, I just have to have that. And I thought, anything that makes you smile every time it starts to rain, who doesn't need that in their life? Because, you know, and I think you've just got to fill yourself up a little bit with these little turbo boosts. There's so much we can't control. But, you know, the little things that you can control, you know, if you're going to put an umbrella up, why not make it a fun one? You know, so, you know, it's that's kind of, yeah, I've learned to live like that. And, you know, the other thing that you were saying there about teaching you and is, you know, like, having bipolar doesn't make you that different from other people. How I used to explain it to people is that sometimes you go a little bit too up, and sometimes you go a little bit too down. You know, there's a normal, in inverted commas, whatever that means, and sometimes you just step outside whatever the normal range is. But actually, all the skills that I have to do, because otherwise I get mentally ill, are the same things that everybody should do to keep themselves fit and healthy. And in some ways, having to do it, because it's a complete disaster if I don't, means that I do it. Whereas a lot of other, so for me, if I don't look after myself, you know, I get mentally unwell, and that's just not fun for me or anyone else. Whereas other people might just get a bit stressed or run down or, you know, whatever. And it's not, the skills are not that different. It's very similar. The things that you need to do, it's just more important for me.
So you know, let's go down that thread. So, which is, what are some of these things that you have incorporated into your life because they are critical for you to stay grounded?
So, I mean, I'm all about making things simple, and so I talk about GBR. get the basics right. And I talk about, and I use the framework of lifestyle medicine for this. So lifestyle medicine looks at 6 pillars, which are, and I'll run through them and then I'll tell you my favorite things if that works for you. So the pillars are, in my words, food and drink, movement, sleep, social relationships, which is the #1 determinant of health and longevity, mental well-being, which I've got a lot to say on, and minimizing risky substances and behaviors. So if we go back and rewind and start from the top, if we look at food and drink, you know, here, get the basics right. You know, I really like what Michael Pollan says here, you know, eat food, i.e. real food, not too much, mostly plants, and then you don't go wrong. And there is really good evidence now that what we eat affects how we feel. So I'm not sure if you've talked about the SMILES trial before, but this is a randomized control trial, which is the top level of medical evidence, where we take one group of people and you take a group of people that are all the same, and we randomly assign some to one intervention and some to something else. Now, traditionally, this is used for to tablets, pills, like one blood pressure pill or not. But in this particular study, it's an Australian study, they randomized people to either carrying on with their usual care, so nothing changes, but they got extra social support to allow for the fact that in the other group they were given dietary support. So in the one group they were given dietary support, and so that the extra contact they had with professionals, the other group they had social support. So it wasn't that. And what they used was a modified Mediterranean diet, which looked at basically, you know, eat more plants, you know, eat less of the bad stuff, all right, and eat more of the good. So plants, veg, legumes, whole grain, you know, all the sort of healthy things we should be eating. And what they found is that the intervention group got about a third better than the usual care group. So we've really shown that what you eat makes a difference to how you feel. And we all know that, you know, we know how rubbish you feel. Might be fun to eat a load of pizza and ice cream, but, you know, you don't always feel that brilliant afterwards. I'm not saying don't do it and don't enjoy it, but don't do it all the time. So, you know, food and drink is incredibly important. Right. You know, looking at the next pillar, we've got movement. For me, this is one of my, you know, absolute go-tos, which is, you know, if you're feeling rubbish, get up and go for a walk, preferably in nature. All right. I mean, we're now showing, you know, this is something I love about sort of lifestyle medicine and modern science, is we're now proving what we've always known to be true. We know that if you get out, you know, grandma knows, everyone knows that if we get back out in nature, we feel better. But we've now identified that trees produce chemicals, and I'll probably pronounce this wrong, called phytoncides that you know, cause changes in our body, and they work to reduce our stress hormones, lower our blood pressure and heart rate, boost our immune function, and enhance our mood. So, you know, we're now working out how these things work, the actual science and the physiology. But, you know, we know as humans that it does work.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course. I'm talking far too much.
No. This is great. It's very engaging. On the movement, in the movement bucket, do you, I mean, you spoke about going out for a walk, right? And that's, there's a good reason to do that. Do you consider things like strength training or high intensity cardio? Is that in the movement bucket, or have you found that that's not, from your perspective, not as critical if you just do the walking outside?
Well, but I mean, for me, when it comes to most of this, do what you enjoy and what you're going to do more. I mean, if you love HIIT, do HIIT. If you love yoga, which I've recently, having spent my whole life going, I don't like yoga, I'll do Pilates instead. I then tried yoga and went, oh, this is amazing. So now I regularly do, 10 minutes of yoga before bed as a real wind down thing. And there's obviously other yoga fans in here.
Yeah, that's a yoga teacher who just gave you that.
Well, and And yeah, so for me, I don't think it matters what you do. I mean, I know that there's good reasons for that we should be doing all the different modalities. So we should be doing our cardio, we should be doing our strength training, we should also be avoiding sitting for too long as well, which is the one that's often forgotten by everybody. They go, I can go to, if I go to the gym for even an hour every day, I'm brilliant. Actually, no. If you're sitting for the other 8 hours, then we know that is independently as bad for you, and we know that even if you break up the sitting by going for a little walk or getting up or moving about, then that improves your mental health, and there are studies to show that.
So I think there are two very critical points that you have made that I want to reiterate for the community. Number one is this whole thing about 10,000 steps. I mean, we have spoken about this on the community a lot, but I think you've just reiterated the point. You're better off doing those 10,000, not even 10,000, maybe even 7,000 steps, but they're distributed through the day so that you're moving all the time rather than sitting all day and then suddenly going for a 10,000 step walk at the end of the day. Because, is it better than not doing anything? Sure. But you're better off doing 7,000 steps through the day rather than 10,000 steps one time at the end. So I think that's one really, really important point that I wanted to just highlight for everybody.
I think that's really true. And you might notice now that I'm standing. So I'm standing at a standing desk.
Right.
And actually, if I sit on a like a ball, like the bouncy, the big exercise balls. I only have a chair for when my son uses my office for his tutor. But for me, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to sit still on the ball. But for me, I either stand, which Nicole, you'll know, whenever we have meetings, I'm always standing, or if I'm sitting on a ball. So you're actually working just that little bit harder. And this is, for me, it's about all those little wins. It's not necessarily about going out and running a marathon, although that's great. It's about how can I just do a little bit more now. And I also have some cards which I like, a deck of playing cards. I haven't got them, they're hidden somewhere, that have like movements on them, so things like punching or praying, pushing, various things that you can just shuffle, keep on your desk. They're not on my desk now because I'd taken them out to show people, that you can shuffle and you go, right, I need to do some movement, and it just makes it much more fun, much more playful. And I think that's, for me, massive part of it, about the making it fun, fill your life with things that make you smile. I think we really massively underestimate the value of play and fun and joy, because these things are really important. And if we look at like positive psychology, whereas in the past we were all about making people well, the ill people well. Well, what about getting people who are well and making from good to great? And I think the whole movement around that is incredibly important.
And I think the other point you did make, which is also important, is the best form of exercise is the one you can do sustainably,
the one you enjoy.
And so those are the first two: food and drink, movement. Then the third one,
sleep. So, and I think for me, this one in some ways is obvious, because we all know how rubbish we feel and how much harder we find it if we're not sleeping well. Any parents of young kids will tell you that. And actually, it's amazing when you have young kids, you sort of adapt to it. And my kids are a little bit older now, but if they get me up in the night now, I feel dreadful the next day. And you think, wow, and it also, it feeds into so many other things, because it makes making the healthier choices more difficult. It makes you crave those high calorie, high carb foods. So it makes everything much more difficult. So I think it's really important to prioritize sleep. And I think it is becoming more sexy to prioritize sleep. Before it was, you can sleep when you die, and I pulled an all-nighter and all that. It used to be a bit of a badge of honor. And anyone who's worked as a junior doctor knows it's really not fun working those long hours. It's really not fun having to make those really difficult decisions in the middle of the night when you've not had enough sleep. So, I think sleep's really important, and prioritizing that. And my top tip for prioritizing that is, it's quite repetitive, some of these things, but it's get out in the morning light, because what that does is it sets our circadian rhythm for the day. So as soon as you get up in the morning, get up and get outside if you can. If you can't, just put all the bright lights on or get by a window, because that will set your circadian rhythm and set you up for going to bed later in the evening. That's my favorite tip for that one.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next pillar, social relationships. And this is the number one determinant of health and longevity, as I said. We are hardwired. Our very survival as mammals depends on our social connections. If you think about puppies and babies, they really don't do very well without the social connection. And for that reason, our stress response is designed to be triggered when we are isolated and alone. That doesn't mean never be alone. That doesn't mean don't ever take time to yourself. But what I'm saying is if you don't have the social connections, it triggers our stress response, which then has massive physiological, so body system downstream consequences, increasing our risk of pretty much every chronic lifestyle related disease. So, and one of the things that I think highlights this the most is if you look at I've forgotten what it's called now, the Harvard study of longevity study or something. Yeah, I've forgotten what it's called, but that they've run over 80 odd years. JFK was one of their participants, so presumably one of the causes of death is gunshot wounds. Unfortunate, but what they've shown is that if you look at people aged 50 and try and predict their health age 80, that looking at the quality of a person's social relationships or marriage is a better predictor of health, physical and mental, age 80, than your cholesterol. And we spend a lot of time as doctors and perhaps as people who are interested in our health fanning about treating cholesterol, but how often do we go, actually, forget about the statin, I'm going to sit down and have a chat with my husband, which would probably be better for me.
I think that's such an important point. We don't give that enough priority, but it's amazing how much of a determinant it is. And so one of the things very often I remember telling my kids from the time they were young, they're like sick of me saying it, is, the 5 people you surround yourself with are very critical because they determine your learning, your rate of learning, your mood, your mindset, your attitude, and you determine theirs. And so, surround yourself with happy people who teach you who you teach. And I think this is an example of that, right?
And I think if you look at the blue zones, the communities where people live, they've got the most centenarians, so people over the age of 100. If you look at the what's the Japanese one? Okinawans. They have a Maui, I think, something like that. So they have 5 people that they stay with their whole life that you can really depend on. They're power 9 out of the blue zone communities. One of them is friends and family, your social connections.
I think that's such an important point. We don't give that enough priority, but it's amazing how much of a determinant it is. And so one of the things very often I remember telling my kids from the time they were young, they're like sick of me saying it, is, the 5 people you surround yourself with are very critical because they determine your learning, your rate of learning, your mood, your mindset, your attitude, and you determine theirs. And so, surround yourself with happy people who teach you who you teach. And I think this is an example of that, right?
And I think if you look at the blue zones, the communities where people live, they've got the most centenarians, so people over the age of 100. If you look at the what's the Japanese one? Okinawans. They have a Maui, I think, something like that. So they have 5 people that they stay with their whole life that you can really depend on. They're power 9 out of the blue zone communities. One of them is friends and family, your social connections. It's incredibly important.
Yeah, one of my friends, what you just said reminded me. He once defined for me his what he thought was a definition of of a person you want to be surrounded with. He said, I should be able to call them up at 1 a.m. And the fact that I'm calling them at 1 a.m. Makes them drop everything, wake up and come without asking me why I'm calling them. Then I know they're one of the 5 people I want to surround myself with. And I thought that was a very thoughtful, insightful way to do this.
And for me, like looking more sort of specifically at mental well-being, I've got my top tips that over, I mean, years of, I would say, trial and error, but it's kind of probably more error and error, because let's be fair, we learn more from our errors. I'm getting myself in a tangle. But my very first, so what things do I do to look after my mental well-being? So for me, it's first of all notice. So notice how you are, and I think we're absolutely rubbish at doing this. And it doesn't have to be anything big, but for me, when I first started kind of going, right, okay, how am I would notice my ears were like this, my shoulders were earrings, and I'm exaggerating, but they were, they were up, and then you're like, okay, let's put them down where they belong. Right, good. And then once I'd stopped wearing my shoulders like earrings, I realized that my jaw was really tense, and I was like, okay, so let's try and relax that. And now sometimes I notice when I'm driving that my left knee is really, really, because for us, our left knees are, well, we have clutches and things. But I'm like, oh my God. And you think, how does, where am I holding this tension? But you're like, it's there and I'm noticing it. And if I notice it, what do I need to do about it? And it can be something as simple as put your shoulders down, which resets your body, your physiology. So I think, for me, that would be my top tip, would be notice. Second, I'm all about breathing. All right. Breathing's a really good thing. You should do it. It's very bad if you don't. But the good thing about breathing is it's not something that people, they know you're doing it, but they don't know that you're doing it to benefit yourself. And I've got my 3 top breathing techniques that I use, and I had 2 and now it's become 3 because my watch has a new one, so why not use it? It's on my wrist. And those are the physiological sigh. So this is, I have a version of it which we can do together now if you guys don't know about it.
Please, that'd be great.
So this is my adapted version. You can do it any which way. So for me, it involves taking 3 deep breaths, and I'll talk you through doing it. You take the deepest breath you can, and then you take 2 small breaths on top. You hold for 3, and then you let it out slowly, and then you pause. You do that twice, and then you take a deep breath. So we'll do it together. So in through your nose, right at the top, 2 more, and then hold, and then let it out slowly. And then hold, and then do it again. Let it out slowly, and then hold, and then just take 1 more deep breath. And you might find you're a little bit lightheaded. That can sometimes happen doing it. But I do a lot of work with bus drivers, and I call this like a clutch, that you sort of disengage the engine and you choose what gear you want to go off in. Okay, so that, and it's quite an obvious one, I suppose, that one that you're doing it. My second favorite one is something called coherent breathing, which has been used to treat ground glass lung, which was the survivors of 9/11 had lung conditions, which was supposedly irreversible, caused by the debris from the disaster. And they use this technique with them for just a small amount of time. I think it was 5 or 10 minutes, and actually they saw some improvements. And this is about I modify it. So I do it as you breathe in through the nose for 4, you breathe right down into your belly, so you move your diaphragm, and you breathe out through the mouth for 6. And we know, and the reason I modify it a little bit is because I extend the out breath a bit, because we know that that's uses your parasympathetic, your rest and digest system, so it calms everything down. And we know that breathing at about this rate, which is gives you about 5 cycles a minute, nice and slow. It slows everything down, and it gets your heart, your blood pressure, all these things into a a good physiological balance. And so we call that coherent breathing. And the last one I use, and as I said, it's because it's on my watch, is box breathing. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. And my watch literally will buzz me through that for 5 minutes, which is why, because it's easy. Make it easy. We're all about make it easy. If I'm sat down having a cup of tea, I'm feeling a bit frazzled. All right. I think, oh, my watch tells me I'm frazzled. I'm like, I can feel that. So and it works. And by having that buzzing, it keeps you on it. So that's good.
Got it. Now, this is very practical. I think we can incorporate these breathing techniques. And by the way, all of what you're talking about will be in the show notes. So for people who either missed the call or want to refer to any of this, they can just refer to the summaries that we'll send out on Saturday.
Well, if I've said something wrong, please do correct it. If I've got my words the wrong way round, don't put them in the wrong way round.
Absolutely. All right, and then that was the mental health.
I think I saw someone just ask a question. How
so
does breathing?
We'll get to the questions
okay.
at the end. So we'll keep 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So in terms of what other things that I do in terms of managing my mood is I do what I call 3 good things, and there's quite a lot of evidence for this. So Marty Seligman has used this and has shown that if you do this for a week, even 6 months later, you can be feeling better. And partly sometimes that's because you're still doing it because people feel the benefit. And what it involves is it's really simple. All right. I mean, I do it before bed because that works for me, is at the end of every day, I write down 3 good things. So, and it doesn't have to be big. It could be, if there was a beautiful rainbow when it was raining. It could be, I've had a fascinating conversation with Nikhil. It could be, I had a really good hug with my kids. It doesn't have to be anything big. I personally do it Monday to Thursday because I don't know why I don't do it at the weekend, but I don't. And apparently research has shown that actually if you do things all the time, like these type of things, it sort of loses its impact. Whereas if you do it sort of regularly but not every day, it keeps its impact. And how this works is that we are hardwired to see the negatives, all right, and that's because it's a protective mechanism. All right, if we rewind back to our sort of ancestral days, it was really important for us to remember where the saber-toothed tiger was or whatever, and so we will remember the negative things, the threats, and it's something like a ratio of 3 to 1 or 5 to 1, something like that, that we need to remember. We need to sort of see good things to bad things to try and balance it out. So by looking for the good things, you start to see the good things, and then it sort of rewires your brain to balance it a little, to see more positives than or not more positives, but to notice the positives more.
Got it. And then that the last of the 6 months? I think there's still one more.
Well, there's managing risky substances and behaviours, which I think in many ways speaks for itself. I mean, I call that fags and booze, but I think the other thing that we need, the other part of that, which I think is quite important, is the risky behaviours as well. So that can be things like gambling, excessive shopping, too much time on social media. And actually, I think those things, fags and booze, we know a lot about, but those things, I think they can be incredibly important. And if we're spending a lot of time on social media, we know that's not necessarily good for us. We're seeing we're creating, we're comparing our insides to someone else's very much curated outside. So it's not a fair field, but also a level playing field. But also, what are we not doing? So if we're scrolling on we have a finite amount of time in a day, all of us do. And if we're scrolling on social media and we're doing those things, what aren't we doing? Are we not spending time with our loved ones? Are we not, spending time in the gym, doing something creative? What aren't we doing? So in some ways, it's not in itself necessarily that it is solely bad. It can be what people are not doing instead.
Yeah, the opportunity cost. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so what's your advice to parents? I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. My 12-year-old, my 16-year-old is all the time on their phones, on social media, and they don't share much about what's happening. But, there are all these stories of kids sort of, making bad decisions, harming themselves.
Mm.
I'm sure you get this question a lot, Sue. What advice can you give parents about what they can do?
I mean, actually, I don't get asked that one a lot because my kids are a bit younger, so mine are only 8 and 6. And in a work setting, it hasn't been something that I've been asked a huge amount. But what I actually do personally is I make very conscious choices. And for example, I'm incredibly ignorant. I don't watch the news. All right, and it has the benefit because for me, I find the way, I don't know so much what it's like in other parts of the world, but where we are, it's it's always the biggest, the best, the worst, the whatever. It's the hottest summer since last July. You're like, well, of course it is. It's the only July since last July. And and I'm like, I don't think that does our bodies, our systems any good. And yeah. So that constant being hyped up, but also, there's so much, negativity and things. And I just kind of felt, look, this doesn't benefit me. So I don't do it. Now, I personally do use, occasionally use social media, but I use it as a kind of a way of resting my brain. I don't really pay attention to it. It's a bit like watching nonsense on TV. You just kind of do it just to give your brain and this is biologically completely incorrect, but it's how my brain thinks of it, is that it keeps the front of my brain busy while the back of my brain's filing. And that's not biologically correct, but it for me, I find that a useful analogy. It's sort of nonsense entertainment. I don't pay too much attention to it, and try and I think the algorithms are very clever. I'm not particularly interested in all the clickbait, so I don't get a lot of it because I probably don't stop and click on it. And there's only one time really that I've become a cropper with not watching the news, and that was this happens incredibly rarely in the UK. There were people got shot in Plymouth. There was a shooting in Plymouth, and they were actually our patients. And I'd managed to get to work the next day and not know anything about it. And I spoke to the nurse for about 10 minutes, and she was like, "What do you think about the shooting, Sue?" I was like, "Pardon?" And she was and so yes, occasionally it's embarrassing, but I can live with that because I think for me the benefits are huge. And also, talking about that whole everything being jazzed up, even watch. I mean, I'm a massive rugby fan. I love rugby, but I was watching the Lions tour, and I was watching the beginning of the match, and there are fireworks and flames, and I'm like, for goodness sake, it's a rugby match. I don't mind a bit of drama, but this is, my heart is going like this, and the music's playing, and you're thinking, this isn't good for our kids. It's not good for the players. It's not good for any of us. Let's keep it in perspective. A little bit of drama is fine, but too much, I think, it's not good for our nervous systems.
Yeah, no, it's so true. One question on this sort of related to this is women going through perimenopause, menopause. Those are tough years, just physically and also mentally, because your body and all the hormones are just going through a roller coaster. Are there different things than what you have recommended that they should be doing?
So, well, first of all, I am a perimenopausal woman. I'm 48, so I'm in the throes of it. I mean, for me, I think for how I personally deal with it is when it's tough and you've got the first thing you pack to go away for a weekend is for 2 nights you set 2 pairs of pajamas. You're like, when did that become a thing? But you think see the humor in it, it's a natural stage of life, and I think, I'm not anti using HRT. I think it's a very, very good and relatively safe medication for people who need it. I personally don't take it yet. I roll my eyes at all the research that comes out. I mean, I don't know what you're seeing in other parts of the world, but with us, we've had one recently that says we should, HRT is beneficial from 10 years before the menopause. I'm like, I had my first baby aged 40. So you're telling me I should have been taking HRT then? And I just think, for goodness sake, who's the first thing I want to see is who paid for that research. But anyway, getting to what we can do. So this is when it's even more important to manage our stress levels. And the physiological reason for that is that as your ovaries produce less estrogen. I mean, it's up and down, but overall, excuse me, by the end it's less. Oh dear, I'm obviously talking too much, excuse me. It's less that your adrenal glands, they produce, it's not exactly the same type of estrogen, but it does produce a type of estrogen, and your adrenal glands also produce your stress hormones. So if your adrenals are busy producing your stress hormones all the time, they're less able to produce the estrogen. So that, I think that's one really good reason to absolutely double down on your stress levels, even though it's an incredibly difficult time and you've often got elderly parents, you're in the middle of your career trying to run a business, you've got young kids, life is in full multicolored, technicolored glory. But I think, it makes it even more important to look after your stress levels. The other thing that I think is incredibly important is to manage your blood sugar levels now, and it sort of ties into the same thing in that if our blood sugar levels go too high or too low, if we're roller coastering up and down, this is a stress on the body, and it therefore makes us produce the stress hormones, and it makes all our symptoms worse. And if we're producing lots of stress hormones, it does things like makes the hot flushes or flashes, depending on where you are, all these things worse. It affects your sleep, it all ties in. So for me, the tips are manage your stress, try and take steps to avoid the sugar roller coaster, and there are lots of ways to do that. And two, to remember that this is a natural stage of life, and we don't medicate puberty. So why I mean, it's difficult. And maybe I will take HRT if it gets worse. But for me, when I can't remember my best friend's name, I mean, she knows I know her name, so we just laugh. I'm no less a human, and these things just happen a bit more. I just laugh it off and not worry about it. But that doesn't mean that for some people it's not incredibly difficult and incredibly serious, and there is definitely a role for HRT.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to have a session dedicated to this phase, perimenopause, menopause, and HRT.
And you could have a whole year dedicated.
Yeah, to it. Yeah. And in fact, one of the things we are launching with a healthcare partner in the US is a menopause sub-community, which will be run by doctors who will be providing practical advice, because there are like 100 symptoms or more than 100 symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, and so it requires a whole focus around that. So a question around testing. There is for cholesterol, for lipids in general, there are lots of parameters that one is aware of and is familiar with. Is there any such parameter that provides insight into aspects of mental health?
Not that I'm aware of. Now, some of the more recent thoughts are that mental health is a sort of form of brain inflammation. So there is some thoughts around perhaps some of the inflammatory markers, but I'm not sure whether that's in clinical or therapeutic. What's the word? Whether it's useful therapeutically yet. But there are certainly books I've read on it. So Brain Energy, I think, is one, and The Inflamed Mind or Brain, which kind of talk about depression and mental illness like inflammation in the brain. I don't know whether things like high sensitivity CRP may be useful, but I don't know. I mean, personally, I'm more about get the basics right. And I think for so many of us, we haven't, including me, we haven't got the basics right. So for me, I don't need to be testing my serum rhubarb to find out, I know I need to sleep, eat the right things and do it, and once I've got all that under control, which, let's be fair, is a lifetime's work, then for me, you can then start, I mean, I'm not saying don't do the basic screening. I know what my cholesterol is. I know what my triglycerides are. Those things I do know. I do, for me, the whole blood sugar control was incredibly important. I had gestational diabetes, so I know that I've got a 50% chance of having, diabetes. So, that side of things incredibly important to me. And it probably, they talk about diapression. So, for me, and I don't think I've talked about this already, it's amazing we've got this far, that I don't call it a mind and a body, I call it a modi. We are a modi. It is just one thing, and perhaps it's a great question, but perhaps in the future we will have a test but do we need it? I mean, do we need it? I mean, do you feel good? How do you feel? I mean, that's surely, well, for me, other people will feel differently.
Yeah. And it's now been shown again and again that overall insulin resistance does play a role in all these different aspects, right?
Inflammation, insulin resistance, that is pretty much the cause of everything, from what I can gather. And these things hadn't barely been invented, and we haven't mentioned the microbiome. That's a massive thing, and the microbiome is hugely important in your mental health, and that's how the mechanism by which we think what you eat and eating more plants works, is that by your microbiome produces nearly all your body's serotonin. Yes, it might not cross the blood-brain barrier, but what it does do is it gives the signal on the outside that all is well, kind of thing, and that signal gets conveyed. So microbiome, hugely important. And when I was at med school 25 years ago, the gut was kind of a tube. You ate fiber to keep you regular, whereas now there's so much more to it, and incredibly important.
Yeah, no, I think the concept of the gut being the second brain is becoming, there's a lot of research going on in that phase, and that's why how your stomach feels, how your gut feels, what the microbiome are, that with that gut brain axis, the HPA axis changes how you feel about things.
Well, the gut-brain axis, I mean, 80% of the signals are going from the gut to the brain. Now, your body is a well-designed machine. What is that telling us? Which is in charge?
Yeah.
So keep your gut happy. So yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I write a blog post, Sue, right, every couple of weeks, and my latest topic was prebiotics versus probiotics, and how it impacts the microbiome. It's such a.
And what did you find? Give me the tips.
My conclusion was most probiotics, especially supplemental ones, but frankly, any probiotics, very rarely survive the journey into the gut. But the prebiotics are super critical so make sure to feed what you already have rather than trying to put new stuff in, which is not going to make its way all the way in.
So my things, I mean, I'm all about food, and I think if it comes to feeding your guts, it's fiber, so which is plants. There's no fiber in animal products. It's eat more plants. It's fermented foods, so things like yogurts, kefirs, sauerkraut, kimchi, that kind of thing. And the third thing for me is to keep away from the ultra processed food. We know things like sweeteners, emulsifiers, all these things are really bad for our microbiome. And other things like relating in mental health, like our medication that we take. So I think, I don't know whether it's all SSRIs or just sertraline, is essentially like an antibiotic. Absolutely, annihilates your gut microbiome.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying don't take it. I take it, but these things, everything is intricately related.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway from what you just said is, if you're on antibiotics, which you're only going to be on hopefully when you really need it, make sure as soon as that's over, that dose is over, focus on rebuilding the microbiome, because it has just been destroyed.
But I think also focus on doing it. I think the evidence, is a little conflicting, but I think the evidence is stick to the things I've just said. Don't take masses of probiotics and things. I think it actually, the evidence says, eat good healthy food, perhaps double down on your on your fermented foods, really do those things, because that's what will help build you up, rather than taking pills full of bugs, apparently.
No, the probiotic industry I wrote about in the blog post is as big as the statin and diabetic drug markets combined. That's how big it is. And
well, I think people are missing the point. And this makes me incredibly cross, and you could get me talking about this all day. We're going off topic now, and I'm meant to be shutting up now, and I'm just warming up. But I mean, to me it's similar to the whole weight industry. We have one big industry making a lot of money out of making us all ill by providing a crazy food environment, and we've got another industry coming along and fixing it. And rather than going, hang on a minute, let's sort out the real cause, and the probiotic, I'm not saying there isn't a role, never, but I think the evidence is actually showing that, I mean, you probably know more about it. It changes on a daily basis. But, I think you go back to those 7 words, eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Yeah, exactly. So let's take some audience questions. I think there's Shruti has just shared that Harvard study you mentioned, Sue. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for remembering it, quoting it. I wish I could remember things. I've talked about that so many times, and it just nothing stays in my brain anymore. But there we go.
We will make sure to add that link into the summary. Saili asks, how does the breathing help? Does it help managing mood?
How does it help? I think that helps with, I think on all sorts of levels. I think it helps with regulating your stress levels, and your stress levels, that then affects how you're feeling. I think it helps your physiology. I think it allows you to stop and choose how you react. And an example that I could give, and this is something that I didn't mention, is the difference between reacting and responding. And I had 2 days where I was traveling quite long distances for work, for me drivers, different parts of Devon and Cornwall. And one day I was in a great mood driving, and I was letting everybody out, and everything was good. The next day, I think I was tired because I'd driven a lot the day before, and people who were coming out in front of me, I was getting cross, and I was like, hang on a minute, why am I getting cross? Why am I getting cross? I was like, who cares that he's pulled out, in front of me? What difference does it make? Getting cross about it isn't helping me. And actually, so having these techniques where you take the time, you take a breath, you laugh at yourself for your reaction, and you choose to be different. I think all of those things, I've sort of rolled about 75 answers into one there, but I think breathing, it helps to regulate our physiology, which helps with our overall regulation, which also affects our mood.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that my observation. So I love data, maybe to a fault. And so one of the things that I have found is when I breathe, and I typically do the 4-7-8 as well as the regenerative sigh, and those 2 techniques, there is a very, very measurable change in my heart rate variability. And this goes to the point you were making earlier, which is, when your parasympathetic nervous system starts, taking over, your HRV improves. When it's your sympathetic nervous system, your HRV is getting hammered.
Well, it's really interesting because I've only just started measuring HRV, and I'm not convinced how, I mean, maybe you probably know more about this than me, but how reliable, because my HRV sometimes goes down when I do the breathing exercises. So I'm like, oh, clearly I always knew I was wired backwards, but I feel better.
No, but it depends on the device, because some devices only measure HRV at night. And
no, this one does it. I can do a snapshot.
Okay. So then there's something wrong with that.
I probably need to read the instructions rather than just pressing the buttons.
There is a comment from Amrita, maybe a comment and a question. I think she's based in the US, and her observation has been that sometimes doctors are handing out the bipolar diagnosis like candy, because they find that it's almost like a weight. Her view is that seems to drive medical treatment, and that may be the driver. Is that true elsewhere? I'm assuming it's not true in the UK because it's a
It
government
is.
funded system. Or is it?
Oh goodness. I mean, it drives me nuts because everybody now has bipolar, particularly bipolar 2. And in fact, someone said to me the other day, "Oh yes, have you got bipolar 2?" I was like, "No, 1." And she went, I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I have a massive, there's a great book, I think it's called the Age of Diagnosis or something. If I've quoted it wrong, I'll send you the link. It's absolutely brilliant, because what is the point of a diagnosis? It's not to fill pharmaceutical companies' pockets. It's to help people feel better. And it's not to absolve people of responsibility. I mean, as I've said, I don't talk about my diagnosis. I've never talked about it to my patients. That's not appropriate. But people will go, "Oh, that's just my bipolar," and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Your bipolar is part of you, and you need to manage it. I don't think, I mean, for me, I've been on medications for it for 25 years since diagnosis, but I am on lower doses now than I've ever been on, and I'm hoping to be drug free. And I've been told that by I'm no longer under the psychiatrist or anything like that. We in this country, we discharge everybody as soon as we can. But speaking to psychiatrists who know me and who I've worked with in the past, they're like, yeah, I think take it really slow. And oh my goodness, it's so hard coming off the drugs. I could do a whole talk about that. There's a whole guidelines on it, and really hard because you're physiologically adapted to it being like that. So it's not that you're ill, it's just your body's just used to it. It's not that it induces addictive. It's not that. It's slightly subtly different, and I probably explained it all wrong, but yes, but it drives me nuts that people, everyone's got bipolar. It's an excuse for everyone. Everyone needs pills. I mean, that's just rubbish.
Right. Yeah. No, I get it.
But it has really affected my life. I wasn't able to do my finals. So, there is a real problem there that does need treating. And I did need medication then. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're well out of time, but Ashish's question, did Sue mention SSRIs destroy gut microbiome? The answer was yes.
That's on the BSLM Medics Microbiome course. I'm not sure if it's all SSRIs, but I'm pretty sure it's sertraline. And I did that course, and that's where I learned it.
Okay. And Nadia mentioned there's also pursed lip breathing that helps a lot. And I don't know whether you've tried it, Sue, but Nadia, you can maybe offline just share on the community how one should go about it, so we can add that to the show notes as well.
Really helpful. Really helpful. Like breathing through a straw is, and it almost gives you focus and slows everything down, just calms everything down.
Right. No, so that was it. Thank you so much, Sue. I'd love for the community to show their love for the conversation. It is absolutely insightful and genuine and open, and that's exactly what I knew this was going to be. So thank you.
And do get in touch. All right. I'm always happy to speak to people, talk to people, help in any way I can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Sue. Bye.
Lovely to meet the rest of the community.